Since Marcus Freeman took over as head coach, Notre Dame has typically not performed very well after a big win, but they are 3-0 after the bye week, so something's got to give when the Irish host the Stanford Cardinal on Saturday. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018 and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And I appreciate you joining me here on Wednesday, October 9th. And thanks for making this your first listen of the day. This show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Please like and subscribe if you are watching on YouTube, or rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, your 11th ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish are set to square off against the Stanford Cardinal on Saturday in what is a rivalry game. The winner of this game gets the prestigious Legends Trophy, which is basically the most coveted trophy in all of sports. And if you're not familiar, it's like if you combined an Oscar, a Grammy, and the Nobel Prize. That is what's on the line for the Irish this Saturday. And today we are going to preview the game in all three phases. Plus, I'm going to give my keys to the game and share some predictions at the end. But we begin with what you need to know. So kickoff is set for 3:30 p.m. Eastern in Notre Dame Stadium, and the game is going to actually air on NBC this time around, not Peacock like the last home game against Louisville, which is still so ridiculous that Notre Dame had their biggest home game of the year on Peacock. But we're going to move past it. You got your usual crew, Dan Hicks and Jason Garrett, on the call on this one, and the forecast for Saturday looks absolutely beautiful. High of 75 degrees, partly cloudy, just a perfect October afternoon in South Bend. I am jealous of everyone who gets to attend this one because it is going to be a beautiful afternoon in South Bend. And Notre Dame leads the all-time series in this one, 22-14. The Irish won last year's contest in Palo Alto, 56-23, and the score really wasn't even that close, thanks to a career day by running back Wojciak, who ran for a career-high 238 yards and 4 touchdowns in his last game with the Irish. He did make up for his fumble, or at least almost did, against the Cardinal the year before, the last time they came into Notre Dame Stadium, and that one basically lost Notre Dame the game, and that Stanford team was terrible. David Shaw's last year. The fact that they lost that game was truly just such a mess. And honestly, it still kind of hangs over Marcus Freeman in year 3 because they continue to have these letdown performances against bad teams. Now, this Stanford team is certainly better than that year's team. They are coached by Troy Taylor, who is in his second season as the head coach of the Cardinal. They finished 3-9 last season, but they're off to a 2-3 start this year with wins over Cal Poly and a road win against Syracuse, which is a pretty impressive win for them. Things were bleak for Troy Taylor when he took over. The end of the David Shaw era was bad. And even though Shaw had some highs to the program, I don't know if it was just his refusal to adapt to the modern era of college football. Either way, it ended really poorly for him. So when Troy Taylor took over, he did not have a whole lot to work with, but he's done a pretty good job rebuilding the program, even though they still have a long way to go. As for Saturday, Notre Dame is currently favored by 23.5 on FanDuel, and the over-under is at 44.5. So based on these numbers, Vegas is projecting something in the range of a 34-10 win for the Irish. Now let's get into the scouting report. We're going to start by taking a look at the Stanford offense against the Notre Dame defense. My biggest takeaway when I look at this matchup is that the defense can and should dominate for 60 minutes. Does that mean they're going to shut them out? No, because I think Stanford is going to do enough trickeration to put some points up on the board like they did last year, but they should not be able to move the ball for the bulk of this game. Now, here's why. So Troy Taylor is the one calling the plays, and I think he's really innovative. They put so many different formations on film. Their guys are constantly in motion, and they do things after the snap to keep the defense guessing. It's partially by necessity, though, because they just don't have the personnel to win by playing you straight up, other than their standout wide receiver, Elike Omanor. We'll get more on him in a second here. But let's start with their quarterback, Ashton Daniels. He's their starter, but he has been banged up recently with an ankle injury. His status for Saturday is up in the air. He's a good runner, and he's an okay passer, but the drop-off from him to his backup, quarterback Justin Lamson, is pretty significant. Lamson just can't throw the ball. It's just not even an option Basically, when he's out there, they're running the Wildcat. But Ashton Daniels, he could throw it a little bit. He has a 59% completion percentage on the year, 633 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, but he also has 6 interceptions, so he's certainly prone to turning the ball over. And when Lamson is in the game, they're basically in the Wildcat. He's carried the ball 37 times, which is actually 4 more than his passes attempted at 33. So they don't even really try. But as I mentioned earlier, the one thing they have going for them in the pass game is that wide receiver, Alec Manor. You might remember him for his unbelievable performance against Colorado last year when he led the Cardinal from back from being down 29-0 at halftime against Coach Prime's Colorado Buffaloes. I remember that game. I was watching that, and I actually felt bad for Stanford in the first half, and then they got it going. And then there I am late Friday night in my bed watching the end of the game on my phone, and I could not believe they pulled off that comeback, and they did. Really, all thanks to A.O. Manor. He finished with 13 catches for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Travis Hunter, who is arguably one of the best players in all of college football, arguably the best player, both as a wide receiver and a corner, he had 122 yards and 3 touchdowns when Travis Hunter was covering him. It was an unbelievable display. So far this year, 24 catches, 317 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And one thing about Stanford is they're known for having great tight ends. They've had so many good ones come through the program throughout the years, and they've got a good one, again, in number 86, Sam Roush. He's a big dude, 6'5", 260. He only has 12 catches for 97 yards this season, but they're loud catches. He's big on third down. He's really good at making contested catches. He is someone who Notre Dame is going to have to account for. But overall, this passing game just should not stand a chance against Notre Dame's secondary. The Stanford offense ranks 105th in pass yards per game with 181.6 yards per game. They are 123rd in the country in yards per attempt and 126th in yards per completion. And their line is bad. It's really bad. They have allowed 16 sacks this season for 97 yards in just 5 games. But their numbers are a little bit better in the run game. And honestly, it's really because of their quarterback, Ashton Daniels. He's their best threat in the running game. He leads the team in rushing with 250 yards on 50 carries. Their leading running back is Micah Ford, who has 230 yards on 47 carries for 5.9 yards per carry. Those are pretty good numbers for him, especially when you consider the fact that this offensive line is so bad. They have ran for 157 yards per game, which is 71st in the country. They average 4.2 yards per carry. But again, their offensive line is not doing them any favors. They give up a ton of negative plays. They are 130th out of 134 schools in tackles for loss allowed. 45 tackles for loss this season for negative 174 yards. So as a whole, this is just not a very good offense. They're averaging just 23 points per game. That's 104th nationally. They're 116th in yards per play, 114th in yards per drive. And they're not good on the money downs either. They convert third downs on just 37% of the time. That's 90th overall. 121st in red zone offense. So I'm just throwing a bunch of numbers at you to paint a very clear picture that this offense is not good. So that is going to lead me to the keys for the Notre Dame defense. And it's actually pretty simple. Stay disciplined and do not bite on the trick plays. Stanford ran a ton of trick plays last year against Notre Dame, and that's a big reason why they jumped out to an early lead. Also, Notre Dame could not stop turning the ball over, and it was just a very sleepy game because Stanford was terrible, and whenever you play at Stanford in the last game of the year, if they're bad, it's basically all Notre Dame in the crowd, but even then, it's only like 50% capacity. I was at that game in 2021, and it was like being at a high school game. Like I remember at halftime, we left the game, went out to the tailgate lot, had a beer or two, and then went back into the game. Like at what major college program can you do that? Well, you can at Stanford. So this is going to be a little bit different, obviously, because it's a home game, but Stanford is going to try to do a bunch of different things on offense. So last year, I remember when Marcus Freeman was talking about how Al Golden was preparing for this game, and he compared him to a mad scientist in his office because on his whiteboard, he had all kinds of crazy stuff written down. And that's what Troy Taylor wants the opposing defensive coordinators to have to do. They don't have the personnel, so they're going to do all kinds of weird things. It's not just the motion. It's not just the weird formations. They're going to have weird splits. They're going to have guys moving around, and it's going to try to break all the normal rules of offensive football so that the Notre Dame defense is on their heels. But overall, Notre Dame's defense should be fine. They just need to stay disciplined, know their assignment, and take advantage. But another key for this Notre Dame defense is dominate the line of scrimmage because they should. As I told you, This offensive line on Stanford is not good. And even though Notre Dame is going to be without their top 2 edge rushers for this game and the rest of the season in Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore, they still have Howard Cross. They still have Riley Mills. They have some really good young linebackers. And this is a big game for Howard Cross and Riley Mills because they have not been dominant up to this point, but they should be dominant in this game. And these trick plays that I'm telling you about, they're only going to work if they have time to develop. And if Notre Dame is in the backfield every single play, then those trick plays aren't really going to be very effective. Stanford is giving up 3.5 sacks per game against their FBS schools that they played so far this season. So this is a great opportunity for some guys in the Notre Dame defense to get in the backfield, pad the stats a little bit with some sacks, some TFLs, and just create a bunch of havoc on every single play. Because the one thing that Stanford offense has been able to do a little bit well comparatively. As I mentioned, they can run the ball, but they have broken off some explosive run plays. It hasn't really been a consistent down after down. They're getting 4 to 5 yards per carry. No, they've broken off some big run plays, and that has helped pad their stats a little bit. But if Notre Dame is dominating the line of scrimmage, they should prevent any of those explosive plays from happening. Again, it's going to be tough to shut this team out, but this matchup should have the same look and feel as it did when Notre Dame faced Purdue earlier this year. Coming up, is this going to be the game that Notre Dame's offense finally starts to click? It should be. More on that right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There are so many great sporting events going on right now. You got college football in full swing. The NFL's in full swing. You got playoff baseball, NBA, and NHL. They are both ready to start back up. So get off your couch, head to see your favorite team play with Gametime. And my favorite thing about the app is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you could buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, now let's flip it over to the other side of the ball and take a look at Notre Dame's offense going up against Stanford's defense. And look, we all know this offense has struggled to move the ball consistently in every game but one, and that was against Purdue. And at this point, I'm pretty sure that the Little Sisters of the Poor could score some points on Purdue and probably get a couple stops in there as well. But when I look at this matchup between the Irish and the Cardinal, I think it is a perfect opportunity for this offense to get right or get really close to being right, especially coming off the bye week, and most importantly, in the passing game. So I think that they should be able to do it. Let's get into the Stanford defense, and I'm going to explain why. So Bobby April III is in his second season as a defensive coordinator, and he's a smart defensive mind, worked for a few years at Wisconsin under Jim Leonhard, and like Leonhard, April loves to blitz. According to Pro Football Focus, they have blitzed quarterbacks on 64% of dropbacks this season. But in a similar vein to the Stanford offense, the reason that the Stanford defense has to be so aggressive and they have to be so exotic with their blitzing is because they lack the talent and personnel to beat you straight up. They're giving up an average of 27.2 points per game. That's 89th in the country, but they're also giving up 6 yards per play, which is a lot. That's actually just outside the top 100 nationally. And when you look at the statistical breakdowns on this defense between how they defend the run versus how they defend the pass, it's pretty staggering. I have not really seen a defense that is this uneven in a long time. They are 12th in the country, 12th in rush yards allowed per game with just 88.2, and they're only allowing 3.2 yards per carry, which is in the top 30 nationally. I was pretty stunned when I saw this, especially considering how easily Notre Dame ran the football against this defense last season, and they brought a lot of the same guys back. But it wasn't just Esme when Notre Dame was running over them. They ended up finishing with 381 total yards. Now, Esme obviously accounted for a lot of that with 238, but Jadarian Price was getting in on the action, Jabron Payne. I think Sam Hartman even had a couple nice run plays in there as well. So Notre Dame was able to run all over this defense last year, but so far, they've been much better against the run this season. Context is everything, though. A major reason why their rush defense numbers are so good is because they are terrible against the pass, and opposing offenses are throwing the ball all over the field. Like, they're not even really trying to run the ball that much. They're just like, oh, we can pass all over you. all right, we'll do that. And that's what Clemson did. That's what Virginia Tech did as well. Although Clemson was able to have some success on the ground. They finished with 150 rushing yards in that game. But the Stanford defense is allowing 270.4 pass yards per game. That's 122nd overall, 8.2 yards per attempt. Their opponent passer rating is 115th in the country. So it shouldn't be a surprise that this defense really struggles to get off the field. They allow conversions on third down 41% of the time. That's 91st in the country. And like I said, there's just no balance here. They really can stop the run to a degree, but then even if they stuff them on first and second down, these teams are converting because they can just throw all over this defense. But that being said, there are still a couple of guys that you should keep watch for on this defense. Edge rusher David Bailey, he had 5 sacks for the Cardinal last season. I think he's one of the best players overall. He's certainly one of the most effective when he's out there, but he's only played 102 snaps this season because he only comes in obvious passing situations so he can get after the quarterback. Also has a couple forced fumbles, though, so he is an impact player. Linebacker Tristan Sinclair is good. Notre Dame fans are pretty familiar with him. They recruited him out of high school. He is their leading tackler with 36 on the year. Also has a sack. He can get after the quarterback, but he had 12 tackles against Virginia Tech. One thing about Tristan Sinclair when you watch him, he brings the noise. Like, he is very aggressive, and he can light you up when he gets a hold of you, when he gets a hat on a hat. But sometimes he's a little bit too aggressive, and that can come back to bite him. So keep an eye out for Tristan Sinclair. Their secondary, obviously, it's not very good if they're giving up all these yards and touchdowns. I guess Colin Wright might be their best player. He's okay, I guess. 23 tackles on the season, but he has allowed 17 catches on 25 targets. That is a 68% completion percentage. He's also given up 3 touchdowns, but he has 2 interceptions, so they throw it to him a lot. He has a lot of opportunities, and he has capitalized on 2 of them, so he has 2 picks. Offenses love to go after the safety, Mitch Leiber. He's allowing a 67% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 72 yards after catch, which tells you these wide receivers and these tight ends are getting a lot of separation when Mitch comes down and covers guys in the slot. So overall, this is just not a defense that should scare Notre Dame. And the Irish should dictate terms here, even though Stanford is much improved compared to what they were last season. So let's get to the keys for the Notre Dame offense. Number 1, continue to build on the passing game. This offense had virtually nothing going for it on a consistent basis in the passing game early on in the season. They showed some life against Miami, Ohio. They took a lot of shots in that game. They weren't able to convert on all of them, but they got 1 to Bo Collins for a touchdown. They also drew 3 pass interference penalties, and they were able to build off that against Louisville. Riley Leonard hit Jaden Greathouse for another deep ball for a touchdown. They had Jane Harrison wide open on a fake rub wheel route there. That was great. So coming off the bye week, I'm hopeful that they figured out some things Riley Leonard can do to become more consistent as a passer. And look, this Stanford defense is going to try to get after Riley Leonard, and he hasn't been all that great against pressure this season. But when they bring so much pressure, that means wide receivers are going to be in more one-on-one situations, and Notre Dame's wide receivers should be able to win those. If they can't win them against Stanford, they're not going to be able to win them on a consistent basis against any other team the rest of the way. So I expect this Notre Dame offense to get Riley going early with some layups, kind of like they did against Louisville when he was rolling out to his right or his left, hitting guys out there in the flat for like easy chunk plays. He missed on those throws against Miami. He was hitting them against Louisville. He got into a rhythm, and I think that's a big reason why he had a little bit more success in that game, because he got off to a good start. But I'm really looking at some Notre Dame wide receivers in this game that really need to step up. Like, where has Chris Mitchell been? He has 6 catches for 69 yards this season. And for a guy who was brought in to be a deep threat, he has a shocking few amount of deep catches. 0. Okay, he's basically been reduced to a possession wide receiver in this offense, and that is not why Notre Dame got him in the transfer portal. I think that they're going to try to take some shots with him this game to get him going. And if it's not Chris Mitchell, maybe it's KK Smith, because that's another player who Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, mentioned before the season as a potential deep threat. Notre Dame needs to take some shots in this game. I think they will. Also, is Mitchell Evans finally back? Because he's played sparingly throughout the first half of the season, and this is not a criticism of Mitchell Evans, by the way. He's coming off a torn ACL, and I think that we all, myself included, were probably a little eager to just count him as all the way back in preseason camp and all that stuff. So now that he's had the bye week, I think he's a little bit more ready to go. And if they can get Mitchell Evans going in the passing game, that just opens up so many other things for this offense, because then teams are going to have to defend the middle of the field, and then they can hit the wide receivers on the outside for some big plays. But even though I think Notre Dame needs to get things going in the passing game, Another key to the game is beat their best. Yeah, Stanford has been good against the run this far, but they have not faced running threats like Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Riley Leonard. And I don't think Notre Dame is going to shy away from running the ball, even though Stanford has had some success stopping the run this season. Notre Dame challenged the best defense they will face all season in Texas A&M to stop them from running the ball on the most crucial drive of the game, and the Irish got the better of them. Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard ran all over Texas A&M on that last drive to set up the score, and that is a big reason why they won. And then you watch what that Texas A&M defense did to Missouri last weekend. Like, that should tell you that this Notre Dame offense, especially their run game, is capable of coming up big in some big spots against really good competition. So even though Stanford has been pretty good so far, I expect Notre Dame should be able to run pretty consistently on this group. Like, yeah, Stanford is going to get some stuffs for sure, but Notre Dame should be able to wear down this group throughout the rest of the game. Again, Notre Dame ran at will against this group last year. They should be able to do it again. Last thing I want to say about this matchup, this isn't even necessarily a key or anything like that. I am just so intrigued and so interested to see how this offense operates coming out of the bye week. I honestly have a feeling it's going to be like how it turned out in 2021 when Notre Dame had a bye week much later in the season. But then they played North Carolina, and it looked like a totally different offense with Jack Cohn at the helm. They went to a no-huddle, quick passing game to help out that offensive line that had been struggling all season long. Jack Cohn was getting the ball out quickly, and that looked like a completely different unit. And then they scored a bunch of points on North Carolina and looked so much better the rest of the way. I don't think they're going to completely revamp this offense like they did that year, but I do expect to see some new formations, new personnel. Maybe they tighten up the rotations, they change things around there. But I think you're going to notice it the most in the passing game. But in the running game, they're just going to rely on their strengths. Love, Price, and Leonard. Hopefully Notre Dame doesn't have to run Riley Leonard all that much in this game, but he's just been so effective and he's just so good at it. I don't expect them to stop it completely, but this is a very, very important game for this offense. They should have a lot of success, and if they don't, it becomes an even bigger concern. Now, for the third phase of the game, Stanford had the best kicker in college football, arguably, last season, but now he is kicking for the Los Angeles Rams. So, did the Cardinal special teams unit experience a drop-off? More on that, plus my predictions, right after this. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All right, my pick this week, I gave it out in yesterday's show, 49ers -3.5 against the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. We've been giving out a lot of winners on the show lately, especially on Thursday Night Football. And even though the 49ers just blew a game against the Cardinals, it was a really bad loss for them. They really, really need a win on the road against the Seahawks. I know 3.5 is a lot on the road, but I think the 49ers are desperate. They're going to get the win, and they're going to get the cover. For more, just visit FanDuel.com today. Look, I know it might seem trivial to you, and maybe you are a little bit tired of hearing me complain about Notre Dame's special teams because it's not as important as the offense and it's not as important as the defense. I get that. But Notre Dame's special teams has got to clean up their act in a hurry, or it's going to cost them again, because it almost cost them against Miami. It definitely cost them against Northern Illinois. And Stanford is good enough to take advantage of any mistakes they make on special teams. So let's take a look at what the Cardinal bring to the table. They lost their All-American kicker to the NFL, but they still have a very stout special teams unit. Their new kicker, Emmett Kenny, is 8 of 9 on the year, and his lone miss was from 50-plus yards. He also nailed a 51-yarder this year, so he's got a leg, he's accurate, and he can kick it deep. They have a pretty good punter as well, who averages just under 44 yards per punt. And their wide receiver, Tiger Bachmeier, who Notre Dame fans might be familiar with the name Bachmeier because they were recruiting his younger brother, Bear. That's right. They have two brothers, Tiger and Bear Bachmeier. Well, Tiger is the primary return man for the Cardinal, and he's been good this season. He returned a punt to the house this season, although it was against Cal Poly, but he's been pretty effective overall, so Notre Dame should probably avoid him if they can. But they're just disciplined. They execute in this phase of the game. And Notre Dame, for their keys on the side of the ball, they've just got to clean up the mistakes over the bye week. Like Mitch Jeter, the kicker, has been great when he has a chance to get the kickoff if it's not getting blocked because Pat Coogan gets blown off the ball or they fumble the snap. And James Rindell, the punter, has been showing improvements this year, but they just have done nothing in the return game, which is actually pretty disappointing considering they got Jaden Harrison from Marshall, and he was an All-American as a return man last year. Haven't really had anything going in the kick return game. Punt return has been a mixed bag. They let Jaden Greathouse go. He doesn't look super comfortable back there. Jordan Faison muffed that one against Miami. So now they got Max Hurlman out there, who I believe transferred from Colgate, and he actually looks good back there. And I don't think he's like another John Goodman type who's just out there to fair catch the ball and hand the ball back to the ref. He is going to try to bring some back. He returned one against Louisville that he probably should have fair caught. So I like his aggression out there. I also think he's safe with the ball. So Notre Dame just needs to clean up the mistakes as a unit. I'm sure it was a big emphasis for Marcus Freeman and Marty Biaggi over the bye. And hopefully we see that in action on Saturday. All right, now let's get to some predictions. Pretty simple. Notre Dame should dominate this game. They have been great on the opening drive on offense this season, so I expect them to get out to an early lead. They scored a touchdown in the opening drive against Northern Illinois, Purdue, and Louisville. They got a field goal against Texas A&M, so the only time they did not score on the opening drive was against Miami. So Notre Dame should get out there, march right down the field, and score. What they cannot afford to do on offense is score and then go into a lull. That has happened way too much this season. And it would not shock me if Stanford scored on the opening drive, mostly because I just think they're going to empty out the kitchen sink on Notre Dame early. Like, Troy Taylor knows that they cannot afford to come from behind in this one. They're not going to be able to do it. So I think you're going to see trick plays, weird formations, maybe impossibly wide splits like they did last year. You're going to see everything early on in this game. So if Stanford ends up going down the field and scoring, I think okay, whatever. Notre Dame's defense is going to be able to figure it out. I'm not even necessarily predicting that to happen. I do think they're going to get some yards early on in this game, but this defense is going to come through when it matters. Stanford is not going to be able to score on a consistent basis. So really, this has so much to do with the offense. And I know that things have not always been great this season. That's pretty clear. But this team, and specifically this offense, did beat a Big Ten team 66-7. 66-7. That is such an insane margin of victory against a Power 4 team, and Notre Dame did that this year. So I'm not predicting another 66-7 game, but I honestly feel like this game should resemble the Purdue one way more than it did Miami or Northern Illinois. For some reason, Notre Dame has not been able to put together a complete performance at home. They should be able to do it on Saturday. And look, if this is a close game in the second half, I am going to be very, very concerned about this team going forward. Yes, Stanford has some good players. Yes, they're going to come out ready to play because this game means everything to them. It's a huge opportunity going to play in Notre Dame Stadium, rivalry game, all that. Even though they've lost 3 games this season could be a success in their eyes if they're able to win on Saturday. So I can tolerate a close game early on, but I think the Irish can and will pull away from this one probably in like the mid-second quarter. I could see it being like 7-3, maybe 14-7 Notre Dame, but then I think Notre Dame is going to turn it on, and they're going to run away with this one. So for my final score, I'm going with 45-7. I think the offense gets it going early. They might have a little lull at some point in this game, but I think that they're going to be able to move the ball consistently throughout this one, and those drives are going to turn into touchdowns. This is a big game for Mitchell Evans. I think he has a good one. And Chris Mitchell, I'm predicting that he will finally make a big play in the passing game because I think they're going to force it a lot to him. He played 39 snaps against Louisville and didn't have a catch, which is a lot. So I think now that they've had the bye week, they've tried to figure out what's going to work in the passing game. I think they're going to take some shots to Chris Mitchell. He's going to convert on one, and I actually think, believe it or not, this is going to look like a competent passing game for once. Ideally, Notre Dame does not have to run Riley Leonard as much. We get a healthy dose of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but Riley Leonard is going to have a big game in this one. I can feel it. This should be a great afternoon for Notre Dame football fans. Like I said at the beginning, it's going to be perfect weather in the stadium, 3:30 day game against a rival. I think it's going to be a perfect atmosphere, and hopefully those people are going to get to watch a dominant Irish performance in this one to match. So feeling good about this game. We'll see how it plays out. That's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning. Then on Friday, we're going to be doing another mailbag. So if you want your question to be answered on the show, drop them in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll see you all tomorrow.